to the Red Leaf Guard, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be talking about the preview for the upcoming season of 2025 Canadian Premier League. And we have our guest to talk about it, and we have Alex Leal and Matt Bridges from the Footy Frenzy, and also Thomas Hewitt from the Canadian Soccer Daily. Nice to having you guys on to talking about this upcoming season. And it has to say it could be a good season, but a lot of people would say it is going to be some unfortunate events for this upcoming season. As known, a lot of people have their eyes on Forge FC and Calvary FC for this upcoming season. Might be a repeat, but I have to say this: it could be some upsets. We might not know, but like starting with the East Side, I just have to say this: like we're seeing now some good things happening in the East Side. There's some good, some bad. I have to say this, starting from the Atlantic area, Halifax Wanderers. I just have to say, like, you might think that Halifax Wanderers was the team that was supposed to be in the playoffs for the Canadian Premier League in 2024, but you see them today. You have like some good names coming in for it. Mm-hmm. You have a former York United player, that Isaiah Johnston, and now you have former Valor FC goalkeeper who was a starter. Now then he moved to Atletico Ottawa for a second choice, and now you're seeing him go to Halifax Wanderers. It's like we're like a move for everywhere, and I think Halifax Wanderers took the right pick to actually to get him. And starting with Thomas here, what's your view on Halifax Wanderers?
You know, I think it's a team that's changed a lot for the better in a way. I think coming out of 2024, they knew they'd have to change things up. You know, a guy like Dan Nimick in free agency probably had to move on. You know, he was up and down. Really, the only remaining key player from that 2023 team that shocked a lot of us was Lorenzo Caligari. So he'll be big in their midfield. And I think when you look at some of the other players now in attack, you've got Sean Rea, Isaiah Johnston, Ryan Telfer up top. Like, these are players who have CPL experience, who should be quite good, creating chances for them, getting shots on goal. I think last year they did really struggle with that, especially out of the gate. I think they didn't win any of their first 7 games. Starting the season better is crucial. Having a number one goalie like Ryan Yesley, Jan Filion was very good for them. Him moving on, Yesley is a top tier replacement, I think. And across the back line too, Nassim Mekadesh, Thomas Merijiger, that's a very good, tall, probably going to be physical, has some offensive upside too out of that back line. So I think Halifax is pretty well poised to maybe get back to where they were in 2023, even if it's with a very different cast of characters.
Alex, your thoughts on the Wanderers?
It's Matthew.
My bad.
You're good. But no, I think they're exciting. Yeah, they've gotten a lot of guys in, and obviously I think one thing that'll help for sure is Geyser's been there for a while, so it's that kind of ever-present manager for them who should help them grow, keep them solid. But I think Bambula, I'm really excited to see what he'll do. I mean, obviously a lot more of a wild card in the league. We haven't really seen much of him. Obviously, definitely not on the Wanderers. And I just think, as long as they start the season better, like you say, they can definitely put themselves in a position to make the playoffs. I won't necessarily be confident enough to take them right now. They really need to prove it for me to be confident in them, but they're definitely a very exciting team for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Now, Alex.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I do think with Halifax, they have a very strong team right now. Going into the first match week itself, it doesn't help that they have to play Atletico Ottawa already in the first game itself. But they have some good young talents, especially Alessandro Biello from CF Montreal, who just came in on loan. He could be a star for them, especially at a young age of 18. You have Sean Rea, who has that experience in the CPL. You also have Isaiah Johnston, who has that experience as well. So you never know with this Halifax Wanderers team.
Yeah, you also have some signings that have been part of Toronto FC for their second team, like Adam Perlman. You have, and you mentioned Alessandro Biello, that is coming in with a loan with Club de Foot Montreal. So you're probably thinking, like, could some of these players actually bring in some good help for Halifax Wanderers and make it to the playoffs? I think that Halifax Wanderers took actual good management to find some actual good players, but you would thinking that could some of the players that have been doing well for the offseason to sign players, can they actually take that moment of looking at Halifax Wanderers as just, well, we have some good signings, and it might not actually help you go to the playoffs, but we might see. We don't actually know yet until the season starts. So, and next, like to the capital of Ottawa, Atletico Ottawa, as noticed, they were the most talked to be the super team of Canadian Premier League. You look at them saying, well, I guess that the whole super team just basically looks like it was going to not be there. There were a lot of teams that used to be named in the Canadian Premier League. I've noticed that, for example, York United, that I know Gareth, a lot of people that talked about York United always saying that the whole, like, for example, the whole David versus Goliath from York United started when they were in the Canadian Championship against Toronto FC. And now you look at, they were used as David versus Goliath when York United was versus Atletico Ottawa. I look at Atletico Ottawa. I don't see Atletico Ottawa being that team using the word super team anymore. I don't see it just being used the word Atletico. And you look at, for example, they wanted players. For example, you have Balou Tabla in there. He was supposed to be that creative player that was supposed to get good goal, actually stand out to be a good player. And now you see him struggling in the previous season. It looks like Balou Tabla, he has to show his skills for this upcoming season. That where is he going to come next? But still, they have Nathan Ingham, you have Amir Didic, you have the experienced player Albert Zapator, and you have Manny Aparicio. And now you look at, you're getting some designated players that could actually help them. So I think looking at Atletico Ottawa, they're still going to be in the playoffs for this. So Thomas, what do you think of Atletico Ottawa?
Well, I think it is. They never liked the super team kind of moniker assigned to them. Nathan Ingham, I remember him after, I think, their playoff game against York, and they won in the penalty shootout, and he said, we never really liked that. That kind of, in a way, maybe had a little bit of an effect on us because everyone was talking about us in a certain way. And I think kind of in a way coming back down to earth is good for them. They still have a lot of pieces from that team last year. When you look at a guy like Tabla, who, yes, he was a bit underwhelming last season, still maybe trying to find his footing coming back to Canada. But, just because they lost to Matteo Di Brienne or Ollie Bassett doesn't necessarily mean they're going to, suddenly drop off. I mean, this team, Abu Sissoko, Manny Aparicio, Ingham is obviously going to be a great goalkeeper again. At the back, there's Amir Didic, who's still one of the best week in, week out defenders in the CPL. And now with Noah Abatne joining him, that could be an even better partnership. Abatne is someone who has so much potential as a ball-playing center back, defensively very sound and still so young. He really impressed with York United, so I'm excited to see what he can do with a guy like Didic. Yes, I think Ottawa maybe they took a bit of the backseat this offseason, even though they hired a new coach and made a lot of moves. But I think that might be good for them to continue building that chemistry under Diego Mejia.
So, Alex?
Yeah, I completely agree. And especially with all of the top talents that they have and how they reinforced with especially Juan Castro, for example. He helped to bring in that experience that he has at the top level. And they also got Noah Abatne, who could help partner up with Didic. It's going to be a rebuild sort of year for Atletico Ottawa, especially with a new coach and with some new players that they lost. But they are still this is going to help them in the future itself, for the club itself.
I mean, yeah, I actually don't know how much it's going to be necessarily a rebuild year. I think they're just trying to get over that hump and no longer be that third, the third best team behind Forge and Calvary. I think they really want to try and obviously win, and I think they feel this can be their year. I think that's one of the reasons they brought in a new coach, because they probably feel with the team they have, they should be doing better. Obviously, I do think Ollie Bassett is a pretty big loss. He is one of the best scorers in the CPL. I mean, has been since the league started. But yeah, they've gotten a lot of exciting guys. I mean, 3 defenders that I'm really excited about. 20-year-old Noah Abatne from York United, Jesus Del Amo coming from Spain, Brett Levis from the USL at left back. So I think that could be a new look defense, maybe depending on how they play, if they prove themselves good enough, and that could really help them. And like you said, though, Alex, yeah, Juan Castro is definitely going to bring them a lot of leadership. 33 from the Mexican League, played at the top level, tons of experience, and I think that's probably the main reason they brought him in, not necessarily what he brings as a player. I mean, that as well, but I think it's the big thing, the leadership and that winning mentality, because that's what this team needs. They need that winning mentality to get over the hump, to finally, like you said, they're not a super team. They didn't want that moniker, but that's what people have been saying about them, and they kind of need to at least compete at the top and really try and make the final and then even win it. That's what I believe.
I guess Gareth Wheeler is going to take that back as saying, maybe I think that I should take that super team line out of Atletico Ottawa and put that somewhere else, I guess. But York United coming in as noticed that they were versing Atletico Ottawa. I would say that York United found their rivals, which everyone knew which was the 905 Derby, that they wanted to use that as the rivals. But I think they found their touch as who they're versing as a good rival for the Canadian Premier League. I just found it that it was good. But your look at York United for their upcoming season, it's really young. That's who they signed. And now you look at York United, they've already announced that their academy is going to be in the League One Ontario, and it's a lot to even look at. They're going to be more busy, and it questions now of their roster that I would still say that they would still need a goalkeeper to sign for this upcoming season. Right now, you have Ivan Pavela, who's 20 years old and played in Croatia, and you brought in Luke Sink, who played for Toronto FC. He's played for Atletico Ottawa for a loan, and you bring in Alexander Bergman from Estonia. I still see that even, for example, Marcel Babishkov, that I think that we're seeing some players for York United that are young that could bring in that good experience from other leagues out there, but it has to show where York United could actually show its performance for this upcoming season, and also with a new coach, with Mauro Stacchio being up front. Thomas, what's your thoughts on this upcoming season for York United?
Yeah, I like the point about the youth movement you made. Mario Stacchio, 32 years old. He is by far the youngest ever coach in Canadian Premier League history. Eyes will be on this team because of the up-and-coming prospects. Bergman and Babishkov, two Canadian dual nationals, are, might be intriguing prospects. Pavella, obviously, and then you can't really talk about this team without talking about Shola Jimo. Whatever the role he plays, he's going to make an impact. He'll be, I think, 17 by week 2 of the season. So, with a full year under his belt, maybe he can produce even more. I think Mauro, you should be hesitant with him because I think there's, a long line of young players who haven't realized their potential because they were overworked a bit too early. But I do think that, especially if York is going to be bringing players up and down from the academy team, for match days, that this is going to be a very exciting team to watch because they're young, they have a lot of potential, and we'll just kind of really want to go for it. Eustachio has 30 years of experience in this league as an assistant, and I think he's got a good CPL experienced roster to work with a lot of defenders, some skilled attackers. He really can do. Benjamin Mora and Martin Ash both had different types of styles, but I think Eustachio has the privilege of being able to really go either way because of the roster he has.
Yeah, and also that you have Mauro Stacchio, who had experience with the previous head coach with Benjamin Mora. Now he's taking the steps. So I really see that Mauro Stacchio taking that part, and you're completely correct of what you said. And so, Matt, what's your thoughts on York United?
Yeah, young team, young manager, should be exciting. I think they're going to be playing some exciting attacking football. I think they're going to probably actually have a drop-off from last year. I think a big loss is Brian Wright. He's Player of the Year. Losing him to the Forge is a big loss. But they have gotten a lot of guys, like you said, Luke Singh from Toronto. I think that'll be exciting to see. Gabriel Bitar from Vancouver, Stephen Yates, and Adanjana Reed from Pacific. I like that they're getting guys who have been in the CPL, who have played there, who are from Canada. You kind of know that they're going to fit in, be a proven quantity to a certain degree. They're not taking any big risks. And yeah, Jimmo is super exciting to watch him. I think he'll take not a massive leap this season, but just, he's because he's so young, he's such a raw player. But every year, every season, when you're that young, every game you really can see an improvement with the decision making, with being more tactically sound and everything like that. Getting more out of him is what I'd like to see from Stacchio. But this team, I am excited to see. They're so unknown because they only have 11 returning players. We don't really know what to expect from them. They could be one of the better teams in the league, make the playoffs, or honestly, they could finish last. You really don't know until you see it. But no matter what, it is going to be exciting. And I just want to see them play attacking, exciting football with this young team and build. And as long as they kind of keep this core together and this philosophy of, which I think is a really good one, of young players, trying to re-sign them as well and grow them, then in a few seasons, they could easily be one of the best as long as the players grow and the team grows and they give Stacchio a chance. And yeah.
Yeah, and just to follow up about York United, you're also signing a former York player, Julian Antebelli, and that's something that a lot of fans would recognize a lot from it, because everyone knows that now you have an experienced player who's played for the second Toronto FC2, and I think that when you see Julian Antebelli, my bad, and you're probably going to see some of the rosters there, even that they're actually good signings. But yeah, your thoughts on that, Alex?
Yeah, with York United, they have a very young squad. Like, their oldest player is Elijah Adekubi at 28 years old, and their second oldest and third oldest are both 27, and Niall Higgins and Frank Stirring. And you have such a young squad, thanks to, like, Marcel Bivishkov. And you have Luke Singh, who played for TFC last season. He had that experience in the MLS as well because of how bad TFC was last season. But also he played for Toronto FC too. And you have such a young squad thanks to Mauro Eustáquio. And you never know with this team. This team, it could help them just build for the future itself. They may not be good this season, but in the future, you never know with this team. They have so many young talents itself. And I'm very excited to see what Shola Jimo has to offer in this season itself with how young he is, how much potential he could grow into, especially being 16 years old, going to 17. You never know what could happen with this kid. And I just hope he puts that work and effort in to try to be the best that he can for this team and to help this team push forward.
Yeah, I think York United really showed how much talent on Shola Jimo did. He got called up to practice with the national team for Canada, and he's been part of the national team for the under 17. And yeah, he's showing a lot of talent, and he might be that player that will be probably going to be looked at, that if he could actually show that he could be those players to be in that squad, to be in the, for example, like one of those big competitions for the Nations League or Gold Cup, or maybe in one of the friendlies. It just has to wait and see of how Shola Jimo does for the next seasons for York United, or maybe let's see what happens if there is going to be some actions with him. And down in the 905 Derby, we have also in Hamilton, the biggest rivals with Hamilton and Toronto. You have Forge FC being known as that team that did really well in the Canadian Championship against Toronto FC, but lost to them in the series for that. But Forge FC being the regular season champs, but lost to Calvary FC in the playoffs for the North Star Cup. I see how Forge FC has signed big players. They signed York United players, Brian Wright, Mo Hambaboli, really key players for York United. And you're probably also, and also, for example, you have some also good players that what was that for? Nimick, yeah, for example, Nimick, but you also have players that were also good players that they've actually had left, and also they, like, for example, they just they had to get they didn't get they lost Jordan Hamilton, they got Dominic Samuel off, and including Daniel Pereira, but they did re-sign Kyle Becker, like being one of the most experienced midfielders, and you're still keeping Borges, Schwaner, Japapor. You're keeping one of your key players, and also not just what Forge FC is getting. You get Ben Payton who played for Ross County in Scotland. You're actually seeing some good signs of Forge FC coming this upcoming season, and you look at how Forge FC is doing, you're going to see them in the playoffs for this upcoming season, and it just questions how good they're going to show with this kind of roster. It just questions for Forge FC fans. Are they going to be good? Are they going to show that they're going to win it all, or you're going to see some downhills with this roster? It just questions of how Forge FC is just going to play. But Thomas, your thoughts on how Forge FC has done for this offseason?
I think just the offseason, like the progression of it is just crazy to me because, they start, as they always do, kind of re-signing these key players, Becker, Borges. It wouldn't look right if they were playing in a jersey that wasn't orange, so it makes sense. Then they get, the thing that kind of caught me off guard was Brian Wright and Mo Babuli. Like, they were spotted in training at the same time. It made sense. Given that, Kwesi Poku was transferred out, they had some striker injuries, right? As the best striker on the market, it kind of made sense. Babuli less so, but he used to play. He used to play for Forge, had some great moments there. But then they keep going. They get Nimic. They bring back Rezar Rama after a year in Albania. Marko Jevremovic brings us a lot of experience from Greece and other countries in Europe. The cherry on top is Alessandro Hojabrapor, who was training with Orlando City, didn't get that contract, then comes back to Forge. Like, at the end of the day, you look, top to bottom, this might have been a better offseason even than Ottawa's last year, just because of how much top-tier talent they got. And I think seeing them in CONCACAF kind of reassured that. It wasn't the best result, and, that none of them are going to say that CONCACAF in any way was good for them, but especially a guy like Babuli and Wright kind of struggled up top. Babuli on the left wing, a bit unnatural there. Wright kind of struggled leading the line, but a guy like Jevremovic and Rama showing their tenacity at fullback, defending really well. All of this, Jassim Kalailat should be the starter, but Chris Kalong was a really good backup. He was the starter for a lot of last season too. So I think CONCACAF kind of showed that they can be just as good too. Playing a really good team in Rydos, it's hard to be super like as good as they can be in the CPL. But yeah, I think they're going to be really difficult to beat this year.
Yeah, totally agree with it. And Matt, your thoughts on how Forge FC with their off season right now?
Yeah, I think they did a fantastic job. They kept a lot of the guys. They're the best team at the CPL at doing that, at keeping their team, keeping the core guys, keeping them for another season or several seasons now. And yeah, Brian Wright and Mo Babuli from York United. That's two amazing signings. Those are two of the best players in the CPL, especially Brian Wright. That'll help them a ton, especially now that they've lost Jordan Hamilton and Teron Campbell, which are big losses. But Brian Wright, I think, replaces them perfectly. And Dan Nimic at the back, he'll help them a lot there. They did lose Tristan Henry, who was their starting goalie. That's a little worrying. I think he brought a lot of leadership for them. But I think this team got even better, and they were already, they might have lost in the final to Cavalry, but they won the regular season, and they're always going to be one of the best teams in the CPL. And they're my favorite to win it this year. And I just don't see how you can look past this team with what they added, with how good they already were last season, with how little they lost. I think they're just the clear favorites, even above Cavalry for me. I really do. Obviously, coach is still there. He's the best manager in the league, and they're just always a powerhouse. And I really think the gap might be bigger this year than it was last year between them and the rest of the league.
Yeah, and they have the best and they have the best manager for the Canadian Premier League, and now finally he wins the Coach of the Year for 2024, and it was like Bobby Smirrione is just like finally I win it from all those snubs for being the runner-up. And Alex, what's your thoughts on Forge FC now for their upcoming season?
I just have to say one thing before I get into Forge FC, and TFC should have got Bobby Smirnonis as coach, because God, how awful they are right now. They just need someone to kind of help them build it, and especially with Bobby Smirnonis's experience right now in the CPL and how good he's been for Forge FC. TFC just need this. But focusing on Forge FC, I think Forge FC have a very good team, especially with how much depth they have with this team and how big their squad is. It can help them to rotate. It can help them to fill in the gaps if they need to. Shout out to my Portuguese fellow player in Tristan Borges, who is incredible to watch itself. And they have such a good team itself. It sucks that they lost Kwasi Poku, but they did strengthen it well with Brian Wright, with Dan Nimick, with Mo Babuli. You have a good team itself, and you never know with this Forge FC team. I still have Cavalry FC as my favorite. I have to give some sort of lenience itself, but you never know with Forge FC. Forge FC could get back into it and win the CPL, but you never know.
Do we know what's going on with Batabanga yet? Has that?
Yeah.
What is going on with that?
That's been like the thing that everyone thought, okay, at least one thing's going to go wrong in their offseason, and it was going to be Batabanga. But recently he posted on Instagram himself with Nana Ampoma, a winger on Forge, and he was wearing a Forge hat, and it seems as if that's kind of behind them right now. But obviously, if you throw him in there, I don't know who you can even, like, how are they going to get a lineup out? Because all these players are starting caliber. Even if you look down the bench, Noah Jensen, he's a super sub. He scored 6 goals last year, like I think 4 of them off the bench. So he's a late game killer. Ali Monsise too, a fantastic player. So the fact that they can fit all this in, Bobby's gonna be spending some long nights looking at the tactics board.
Yeah.
It also doesn't help that they have all that drama with Batabangi right before the season itself.
Mm-hmm.
Just seeing all of that like tension itself. Was he going to leave? Was he going to stay with Forge FC?
But if it is resolved now, I mean, it seems like it's maybe getting resolved at a good time. I didn't know about that post, and he's obviously still under contract with them, so it looks like he's set to play the season. I mean, he's a great player, but like you said, I mean, it's a great Batabanga. He's going to stay with the team, but now all of a sudden, if he's going to be on the bench, is that drama, like you said, Alex, going to resurface? And if that happens in the middle of the season where he's complaining about the minutes, or whether it's Bambuli or Wright, who knows, that will start to cause inter-squad friction and drama, and that is the kind of thing that could derail their season. Because right now, on paper, I don't know how they don't at least finish top 2. I mean, it's
like you're bringing exactly what the whole situation of Tristan Henry, that about his contract, that he wanted, like they kept Tristan Henry for it, and they just had to get rid of him, and now he's in USL, and we're seeing that kind of repeat itself with Betty Banga. But we'll just wait. We'll just wait at the unfortunate events. What happens with Forge FC?
Yeah.
But the season didn't even start yet.
Oh, we absolutely. But it's like you never know with like if he drops off on form, it's like someone else will replace him no matter what. Especially with all the drama that happened off the field itself and through this off season itself. If he drops off at one moment, Smirnotis will drop him no matter what.
Yeah, I think this team is going to maybe push themselves more than other teams are going to push them, just because it's going to be so competitive. And I think it always kind of has been in that Forge locker room, like competing to start over each other. And Bobby's been there, and that's why I have faith that he'll figure this out. But it definitely is, going to be very competitive. Who's in, who's out is going to be a talking point. It feels like almost every week for them, as long as the injury bug doesn't spread throughout the team.
Yeah. Speaking of like how we've done our East, and now we also have the whole drama with the whole Forge FC. Now again with the whole drama with Valor FC, not going to playoffs and always coming last. But we see Valor FC with their off season, kind of a good roster. We're seeing it with Valor FC, but it's just you're looking at Chris Twardek, you're getting an experienced player. You get Miles Morgan from the second team for Whitecaps FC. And you're also getting Zachary Fernandez, Rocco Romero. We're seeing some good roster for Valor FC, and I think that we're seeing probably a good season for Valor FC. If only it's just a question. It's just really that question: can they actually get to the playoffs for this upcoming season? And a lot of people are always questioning that if it could be this time that Valor FC can make the playoffs or actually be actually really close. And Thomas Hewitt, you what's your thoughts on how Valor FC have done for this offseason for this upcoming season?
I think it went in a very different way than a lot of people expected. I think starting by bringing back Phil Dos Santos, not many people would have told you they would have expected that. Sorry, purely because he's Valor has finished last back-to-back seasons. It's a really unfortunate stat. Still have never made the playoffs in 7 years. Only league original to not have made the playoffs. But they made all the right moves. I think having Zach Fernandez opposite Temi Antonoglu on the other wing. That's two really good fullbacks, and then you'll have Twardek, on the wing back to his offensive roots, which he had in Ireland, but kind of lost that role with Ottawa last year. I think this is a really good team. The problem is I feel like every team in this league has improved. So has Valor, but maybe not as much as everyone else. When you look at losing a guy like Jordy Swibel, your top striker last year, he was a really good finisher for them. He had a lot of talents up top. So, losing that is going to be difficult. But they've got a core now. They've got Antonoglu, Dante Campbell's been there for a few years. If Rafael O'Heen can stay healthy, that's a great midfielder. Gianfranco Facineri and Rocco Romeo, that's going to be such a difficult center back duo for opposition teams to break down. There's two really just kind of imposing center backs that no one's going to want to play against them. That's for sure, because I think this team is going to want to flip that script. They're going to play with a lot of grit, I think. And Dos Santos should be able to get the best out of them.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you. The thing is Phil Dos Santos needs to look at this upcoming season and focus on those key matches for the 2025 season that we need to win these matches, and treat that we need our whole best to make it to the playoffs. And if we're not seeing that, if Valor FC is not seeing that actually happening from the fans, you're going to be looking at it. It's another whole year of that. It's just development for Valor FC of going on. Of when is going to be the next season? Next season, when is that time that Valor FC makes the playoffs? So, Matt, what's your thoughts on Valor FC on their off season for this upcoming season?
I think it was a good offseason. I don't think it was amazing necessarily. What I'm really hoping for them is that they start the season off better, and they should, because they couldn't play at home for the first, 7 games?
Yeah, it's like 2 months or something.
Yeah, 2 months they couldn't play at home because they were doing renovations, but they got new turf now, so that should help them. But no, seriously, I mean, if they started that season off better with how they finished, because they were one of the best teams in the league in the second half, if they can start better, get some more wins the first part of the season, then they would have been a playoff team. So that's what I'm hoping for them now. Dos Santos, like you said, it was kind of a controversial decision. I think if they don't make the playoffs this season, there's no way he gets extended again. I think that's it for him. So it is kind of make or break for him, but he has a real shot at doing it with the players they brought in. They also brought in 2 Portuguese midfielders, Bruno Figueiredo and Javier Venencial. Yeah, Alex, you love that.
Shout out.
How he's going to fit all the midfielders in that team. It's kind of similar, like we said, for the Forge, how they're going to work all the talent that they now have in this. Mm-hmm. For Valor, it's mainly just that midfield position, how they're going to bring it in. We have to see. It's going to be tough. As midfield, you always kind of need depth in that position, and it's not necessarily bad to have extra guys. You need it, especially in the CPL. And it's one of those teams, listen, we have to see how they play. They could be great, they could be poor. I think they're going to be very good because they were really good for the second half of last season. It was just that beginning that was poor. They've got a lot of guys back. Managers now got a second year. So I think they should have a lot more consistency. But that's, until you see consistency, you can never know if a team's going to have it or not, really. So,
well, I guess that the Blue Bomber players feel sorry of damaging the turf that let Valor FC out for 2 months.
Yeah.
So, Alex, your thoughts on Valor FC's upcoming season?
Yeah, they have a very interesting season ahead of themselves, especially with like what Matthew said. They had a strong end of the season, but they did build particularly well in the offseason with Rocco Romero, with Chris Twardek, and you also have, it sucks that they lost Jordan Zweibel, but you have Eric Pop, who came from Karlsruhe, a youngster. He could help them. He is on loan, but he could help them to build on there. You have Diogo de Seisão, you have Jordan Faria, you have Bruno Figueiredo. You never know with this Valor FC team. They have a very interesting squad itself that could still push for the playoffs, but we just have to see how the season unfolds for them.
Yeah, Eric Pop is not a loanee.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is my bad.
Yeah, don't worry. Eric Pop is going to pop up every time that for this season.
Funny joke.
And hoping that he will do some good skills for the Valor FC, and hoping that he'll make the team to the playoffs. And yeah, I think Valor FC could actually show that they might be the underdogs for this season. And I just think that Valor FC is basically too always early to be saying they're not a playoff caliber team for this upcoming season. I think they are. I think that it might be going to be a wow for this coming season, that Valor FC could actually win some of those key games, like for example Atletico Ottawa or for example York United. They have drawn with some those games of it, but I think the problem is that they have been allowing many goals, and you look at how their goal differential went. It's bad from their previous season, and I think that what they really need is players that could score, and that's something that Valor FC actually needs to do to improve in for this upcoming season, and show that they're a true team that will make it to the playoffs. And I hope Phil Dos Santos does well for this upcoming season, so that he doesn't get that point that his whole management is on the line, that he's no longer going to be trusted, and he might get parted ways. I don't see Phil Dos Santos trying to screw this thing up, but if it does, I don't really see Phil Dos Santos coming for this next season.
You may see Valor FC conceding a lot of goals last season, but they did strengthen that well this season with Rocco Romero, with Chris Twardek, with Zach Fernandez, with Gianfranco Facchinieri. You never know with this team. And hey, who doesn't love an underdog story? Who doesn't love to see the small teams prevail over the big teams? Well, David versus Goliath, you said.
Yeah,
just like, playing in a big stadium, right? Mm-hmm. You'll be questioning about that. Well, a lot of people say usually use that, but it was like, for example, like Pacific FC. They used Pacific FC as the underdog, and guess what happened? They actually been the ones that beat Forge FC during the third season.
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah.
And then Forge FC came back of getting their North Star Cup, and we didn't see that happen. But 2024, we saw Calvary winning the North Star Cup, and we've seen like what was it, 3 teams or 4 teams that won the regular season?
It's been Forge 2023, Ottawa won the year before, and then Cavalry won last year.
Okay, so 3 we've seen. So, like Valor FC now into Alberta, we have Calgary FC being the champions of the 2024 season, and not just that, shocking moments for the Canadian Premier League. They've made history, and also that what they made history for?
CONCACAF, first CPL team to win a game in CONCACAF.
Yeah.
The Champions League specifically.
Yeah, first win. It has to be something inspirational of Calgary coming in, but still they did not win the series for it. They were really close for making it. And that has to be something that Calgary FC is going to come into the Canadian Premier League, and people are going to look at. It's going to be a really competitive team. It's going to be unstoppable, but you have to question. It always has to start with how they play on the field for this season. And right now you look at, they still have Carducci. They re-signed Jay Herdman, which they like. They signed Elva, which and it really question. And I still question that that they still have is Meyer Bevan. It is. I think
no, he's gone. He left like last year.
Last year, but he's still I still see that he's listed IL.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, he left as kind of a weird transfer because he left like a semi-pro team in New Zealand. So like, it's kind of a weird thing.
It is weird, but now that you also have a fullback, Michael. From Whitecaps FC2, who's a 20-year-old, might be misspelling it, Grishmithnov.
Close enough.
Close enough. We'll say it's that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just say his first name. Let's just say
from Andorra.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you have Sergio Camargo, you have Ali Musi, and you have Toby Varshevsky. Yeah, you have a good roster coming in for this upcoming season. I and also mentioning young defender Eric Kobza, who could play the mid and the back position. Mostly plays in the back. I think that you're looking a solid team. You're looking at probably still a team that could that will stay in the playoffs and be that competitor for the North Star Cup. But it just questions how this upcoming season goes for them. So, Thomas, your thoughts on Calgary FC?
Yeah, kind of a weird offseason for them because you only signed one new player, Kanija Elva. Re-signed a few guys, exercise some options. But, if you're looking at key departures, Dan Klomp, back-to-back Defender of the Year, has moved on now. William Accio, who had a few injuries during his time with Cavalry, but overall quite good. He leaves. Lowell Wright, also, who was kind of a bit of energy for them in the run-in last year. He also goes out the door, and I think the lack of replacements kind of surprised me a bit. And then also when you see Charlie Trafford retiring last week, I believe, he scored in CONCACAF. So that defensive midfield now, their cornerstone of that part of the field has moved on. But they're still like really, really good. I think they had the depth last year that maybe they looked ahead and said, even if we do lose some guys, the depth we acquired in the last offseason will still work out for this one. Just because Trafford's gone, you still have Shamit Shome, Diego Gutierrez, Jesse Daly, 3, great defensive midfielders. Elva should be a good Accio replacement, brings in some pace, and I think when the biggest gap in the team now is Klomp. But Cobbs and Montgomery, at times maybe they were really being tested by Pumas in the Champions Cup. But that's mostly just because it's their first games out of the off season, and I think Cobbs, especially as a young player, has a lot of room still to grow. I think he has a ton of potential, and having Montgomery, who's proven himself as kind of under the radar but really reliable defender in this league over the last 2 years, is going to help Carducci save the penalty, obviously. So you've got a wall in net still. Gorshevsky looks as good as ever, so I think this is a team bound for more success. Carducci even said recently, I think winning the CPL championship only unlocked even more drive for them and more passion for them to push on and get more trophies. And I think that's something that's almost rare when you see of trophy winners is keeping that drive. But I think they have it, and I think they're going to be really good again.
Yeah. For Calgary FC for trophy winners, and mentioning Dan Klump, it makes a large impact for Defensive Player of the Year for this upcoming season. Also William Accio leaving, Malcolm Shaw, Lowell Wright, and you have Charlie Trafford who announced retirement. And with Matt, what's your thoughts on this Calgary FC squad?
I think they kept a lot of the guys together. They'll still be easily a playoff team, probably top 2 competing with Forge. I won't lie, I am struggling to look past the Dan Klomp, losing him. I think he was their best player. Like you said, back-to-back Defender of the Year, was even 2023 Player of the Year. And it's not just because he's just a great defender, because you can't replace that as long as you bunker down as a team. Maybe you get one new guy in to do what he did. It's the fact of how important he was for progressing the ball and playing up from the back. I mean, he was almost like a midfielder for them at times. Like, seriously, the guy was just a really, really amazing player in the CPL. And to lose him and to not, like you said, not get anybody to replace him, they haven't signed a defender. I think that's a big deal. It is surprising the lack of new signings they've made. Keeping the core, most of the core together is a plus, 100%. And they had a lot of depth to begin with. But to not bring in any new guys, especially after you lose a guy like Klomp, such a leader and your best player, it is a big deal. And Charlie Trafford retiring, he might not have been the most impactful player for them on the pitch, but was a huge leader. And like you said, did just score in the CONCACAF versus Pumas. That was a great performance by him. And to retire after that, they're going to lose that leadership now. So I am a little hesitant to necessarily pick them above Forge and to pick them as repeat champs. I wouldn't do that right now. I do like Elva. That's a great signing. He's 20 years old. He's in his prime. He's been playing in Europe since 2014, mainly
Calgary
in
native.
Yeah, Calgary native especially. So he'll love to play there. Fans will get on his side, especially. He'll put his heart on his sleeve for that jersey in that city. And he looked good versus Pumas too. He looked like the real deal. He looks like he's going to be one of the best midfielders in this league. I'll predict that. But Klomp leaving has me a little bit worried in terms of that top level. If it comes to a final between them and Forge, I think not having Klomp, that is genuinely the difference. That can be the difference between winning and losing in a final like that. It won't be the difference between them making the playoffs because their team is too good for that. But come playoff time, it might get a little bit shaky if they don't bring in any more signings.
Yeah. So your views on the Calgary FC for this upcoming season?
Yeah, with Cavalry FC, I think they definitely strengthen on their attack and their midfield. They focus more on their attack and their midfield, especially with Elva, and it's a big loss to lose Dan Klomp itself. And they didn't really bring anyone to fit the bill for that backline itself. The only person that they brought in for their defense is Mihail from Vancouver's academy. So it's going to be tough for them, especially losing Malcolm Shaw itself too. But I still have them above Forge FC. I think they still have a very strong squad itself, and especially with how well they did in the CONCACAF Champions League. You never know with this team, and you never know with a team, especially before the season itself. They could just pop off and just go ham itself. So I still have my doubts with them, especially with their defense, how they didn't strengthen into their defense except for bringing in Mihail. But you never know, and that's just what the love of soccer is. You just never know what it is until the ball just starts rolling.
Yeah, like Calvary FC might be a team that, like I said, play, they're reigning champs still for the North Star Cup, but you look at them as they could probably do it again, and not just basically that, they could actually be regular season champs. So you might see you could actually see Calvary FC not just win one, they could actually win two for this season. So we just have to see how Calvary FC goes for this 2025 season, and see how this 2025 season turns out. But now in BC, you have Vancouver FC. The last season they came 7th in 2024 for the Canadian Premier League, and almost was in the playoffs. It's kind of a shocker. They had that chance of an opportunity to make to the playoffs, but the last matches for Vancouver FC had no chance to win it for the playoffs. I see Vancouver FC probably a chance, but it just has to wait and see. But again, for Vancouver FC, you're looking at you getting Callum Irving being in the roster still. You have Alejandro Diaz, you have Jose Navarro, you have TJ Talon, Tahid, Vasco Fry. You have a lot of young players in this squad, but also they're signing their draft picks from the U Sports. Is one of them, and also a former U Sports draft, Thomas Powell, in for this upcoming season. So Vancouver FC looks like a haven for players that get drafted for the Canadian Premier League is for sure something. The bad part is you have no Austin Ritchie. You don't get Katin Chung. You lose Grady McDonald, and also James Cameron, but they get to have a bigger opportunity since Grady McDonald goes to Club Brugge for an undisclosed fee, and including James Cameron, who goes to Colorado Rapids for the Major League Soccer Next Pro. And this is something that Vancouver FC made some historical moments for their transfers, but again, it's all about the 2025 season that's questions. Thomas, your thoughts on Vancouver FC's for their off season for the upcoming season?
Yeah, I'll be real. I don't think this is a very good off season for them. In past years, they've kind of been this destination for like not just top CPL players, but top CPL players in a big quantity too. And although that meant a lot of turnover, it did mean like last year they came out of the gate, they won their first two games like 4-1 and 4-0. It was something like that. It's sort of along those lines. So the fact that it's been such a big drop off in signings kind of worries me. And the list of departures, I mean, Gabriel Batar transferred to York, trade to York United for a draft pick, playing into what you said about it, that kind of being a haven for the draft picks, Vancouver. Ricci, Olivier Romans, that was really good for half a season there last year. Renan Garcia as well, losing that experience, and I think he was positive for the midfield. So Vasco Fry is now running the show in the midfield, and in a way on his own, unless there's probably with David Norman, but he was injured I think for a lot of last year. So losing James Cameron, not great, as well as Rocco Romeo. You're going to be starting 2 center backs, one of which being Matteo Campagna, which I think he's capable of being the top center back on a team. But for the most part, both their center backs that are going to be starting were on the bench for most of last year, and I don't think that's in any way a good thing. Kunle Dadaluk, good acquisition at fullback, but I'm just not sure if I'm seeing where, like, Kunle Dadaluk is a signing a contending team is making. I'm just not sure if I see Vancouver as a contender, at least right now.
Yeah, I think we have to see from Vancouver FC, like, they have to try to sign another center back to try to make things good for the team. But you, like as says, you don't as looking at the roster, you don't have really good key players that are really experienced and help the team. But it's just like you have Vasco Fry, you have Alejandro Diaz, but again, you have to look at that roster and say, can that team make it to the playoffs? But yeah, it does look and say, and can that roster be that competitive for this season and make that playoff spot? And your thoughts on how Vancouver FC for this upcoming season?
I'd have to agree. I don't see them contending. I don't see them making the playoffs. It's not necessarily a terrible thing, because you can use this year to grow and improve your system. Last year they played a lot on the counterattack. That's probably where they were at their best, which is, to be fair, it's a system that even if you don't have the players that are considered the top players in the league, as long as you buy into that system, you can find success in it. But like you said, I mean, if your guys who were your backup defenders last year are now going to be your starters, that can easily also really hurt you if you're going to be playing a counterattacking system. All of a sudden, you'll be conceding goals before you get a chance. And like you said, I do like Dadaluke. I like the fact that they got Taron Campbell, CPL's all-time top scorer. He'll bring leadership experience. He'll definitely get some goals, bring finishing, lead the line. But I mean, you look at the list of departures to players in. I mean, it's twice as big. 14 players have left, only 7 have come in. And you look at the guys that have left, like Rocco Romeo, Kadin Chung, and Gabriel Pitar. Those guys have been there since day one. Those are huge losses, especially Rocco Romeo. I don't see how this team is going to compete at the top. They did start last season well, and then tailed off, which is even worse. When their last 8, they didn't win a single game in their last 8. I believe it was 4 draws, 4 losses.
Yeah, I mean, they were drawing a lot. They had to win for the playoffs, and then it was just draw after draw.
Exactly. So that kind of ending a season that negatively, where you're just basically 1 win or 2 wins, and you're basically guaranteed to make playoffs, and you don't get a single one in the last 8 despite starting off solid. That can carry into next season. Negativity, this kind of toxic, I don't want to say toxic atmosphere, that's the wrong word, just a little down, a little down, right? Yeah. Like, we missed out when all we needed was 1 result, and we would have made playoffs for the first time in their history. That can leave a sour taste in your mouth even going into next season. But I think it's definitely more of a growing year. Just try and bet in some of the young guys, even though a lot of them left. Like you said, their U Sport draft picks, Mehdi Asusi and Henry Godbout. I'd like to see them play a lot of games, especially if they do start the season off poorly. Just start starting the young players, really trying to bet them out. Obviously, you can't, just completely forget about the older players who are expecting to start in the CPL, but give the young players a lot of minutes this season. Let them grow. Try and find a system to play that you can bring in success for next season. And not saying this is necessarily a write-off for Vancouver, because, they could still pick up results, especially on the counter like they like to play, but I don't see them doing too much in the league this year.
Yeah, and about the players that they've drafted, that also like mentioning of the U Sports draft picks that they've signed, of even including that Halifax Wanderers signed one of their U Sports draft picks, Javon Mann.
Yep.
Yeah, that who played for Burnbury FC in League One BC, and we're including a draft pick that Pacific FC drafted. Finn Tugwell will be talking about Pacific FC after the team that we're talking about. Even for example, we talked about Valor FC. They didn't even give a contract for their first overall pick? It is a question mark there. Javante Lane, he played for Simcoe County Rovers.
Yeah, they still probably could announce him like right before the season. Sometimes like last year I think Ottawa announced they had signed their draft pick like 2 weeks into the year. But yeah, Vancouver, I think, I mean, you made the point about the outgoing players being like double, like that list is twice as long as the incoming players, but like half the incoming players now are also U Sports players who were in U Sports last year. So, and another guy, Emmerich Fotzing, he's like 17 from the CF Montreal Academy setup. So it's
guys that aren't going to make an impact right away, or you can't see it anyway. So it even is worse in reality than it maybe looks on paper, and it doesn't look great on paper already. So it's not looking good for them.
And this team is like very thin too. Like you can there's only it's 11 on a field. You only have 3 for backup right now. Like it is very thin, this team, and they barely have any depth for midfield itself. Like you never know with this Vancouver FC team. I think this is going to be a rebuild season for them itself, especially with like you have a guy like Turan Campbell who could bring them goals. Like it's going to be good for them to have him because he has that CPL experience. It's going to be a down year for them, especially with not having that depth to cope for in a grueling season itself. Yeah.
I mean, Campbell and Diaz used to play with each other at Pacific a few years ago, so, maybe there's that chemistry, but, Campbell had a lot of injuries last year. He was kind of in and out of form at Forge, so I'd like Vancouver to prove me wrong. I think Ashton Gottby, their manager, he's a great guy, but I just don't know if he has the tools that he needs that are going to make things work, and I'm worried that if something doesn't work early, then they'll just be switching up tactics, switching up formations, and that's just ultimately not.
Yeah, they need to avoid that.
Itself.
Yeah, if things don't go right, don't just start panicking. Don't start worrying.
Yeah.
Just let players grow. Give them minutes, especially the young guys. Get a system, even if that system and that way of playing, you're losing games, right? And again, fans don't want to watch their team lose, but you have to be, at the same time, realistic, and you need to know this team isn't going to compete. But what if they do things right this year, and then for the offseason next, they could grow into a solid team if they give the young players chances. If some of those U Sport guys start to grow, then you can, and they get some better players. And if players like Teron Campbell and Diaz really start producing for them, which you don't know yet, but all it takes is some patience and a steady outlook, and things can turn around. So they need to just, like you said, be calm. Don't start doing that, because that will just lead to worse and worse results and delay any kind of future building. But Vancouver, I think we are all in agreement. Not probably.
I think they just need to sign. They need to sign more players so that they can build on the depth itself, bring in some young talent itself, so they can build that talent up itself. And like they just need a better roster itself, so that they don't go into the season itself. They get injured. One of their players or key players get injured, and then their whole team just collapse.
Yeah, the summer transfer window will be big for them, because also like even if the U Sports players do really well, they're probably just going to be leaving the team in September, going back to school, play for their college teams or university teams. So I think, them doing well could be a blessing and a curse in many ways, and it also could hurt them. But we'll see. I hope they prove us wrong.
Maybe we should. Maybe it's like Vancouver FC turned into their team to the under 19 team that they they're more focused on, that we as known. Now focus that we've been in the Vancouver mainland, now into the island of Vancouver, which Pacific FC. You see, now looking at Pacific FC, they signed Max Anchor, who's on loan with Pacific FC from Vancouver Whitecaps. Probably trying to find that the next Emil Gazdov, I guess. Yep. Probably. And they signed Pedro Machado,
another Portuguese.
Also,
CPL love Portuguese.
Yeah, I mean, Borges won the MVP last year. He's got Portuguese heritage. It's definitely a nice place for it's on the map for the Portuguese players.
Yeah, and also the team that made Phil dos Santos get fired.
Wow, the attack.
And also including Kadeem Chung that played for Vancouver FC, Daniel DePauli, and Aiden Daniels, and including a familiar face, Marco Bustos.
Yeah. Ronan Krat too.
Yeah. A lot, like you're seeing like a lot of players that they've signed that this could be a actual competitive team coming into the playoffs for this season. And I have to say this, like probably top 3, or it could be, or you might say it just questions that if it's gonna make it for the end of the season, that it does question a lot. Again, with all the teams that we talked about, and we're going to Pacific FC, you question, it's always until that the end of the match, that how they show on the field, that making wins, making all those 3 points, or making a one point, it has to show that Pacific FC could make those, and Pacific FC try to go up back to being that regular season champs, or even going for the North Star Cup. That's one of the questions that Pacific FC, and I see Pacific FC being one of those contenders, and with those signings, and again that you signed Emmanuel Montrejano.
I was gonna bring him up.
Into the roster, who has some from Liga MX expansion league. I think that he played for the team, and you look at that. You look at him also, and you bring in Ronan Kratz, mostly a familiar name for the Krat brothers, and you're gonna see Pacific FC a lot of time in the season that can they show with this roster that they could score goals and prove the other teams wrong, that Pacific FC is not to play for. And looking back of Pacific FC, that from the time that they were versing York United, it was kind of a reaction that they wanted to be more better than York United, as I see that. So they reacted to that and showed a good roster. And so Thomas, your thoughts on how Pacific FC is done for this offseason?
Yeah, I really like what this team looks like on paper right now. On the surface level, when you look at their biggest issue last year was that they could not score for like a good chunk of the season. So, on the surface level, Moses Dyer leaving isn't great, but then you think of, okay, Aiden Daniels, he was a creative player with Halifax. He had a lot of potential. Ronan Krat, who was in Werder Bremen in Germany with their second team, and he was scoring a lot of goals and assists for them too. The Dario Zanata, I thought, really grew into his role as a striker late last year, and I think if he continues to take a big step up, they'll have forgotten about Dyer by the middle of the season. And with a guy like Marco Bustos, to play off him, to support him in attack, I think is very important. Bustos obviously has proven himself in the CPL. He won a CPL championship with Pacific. So has Caden Chung, who's the replacement for Gunle Dadaluke. Ali Endom coming back. He tore his ACL last year, but he's coming back at the perfect time now because Thomas Meyer-Jaguar has gone out the door. Ali Endom can slide back in beside Eric Lajeunesse, most likely to start the season. Their goalie situation, I think, is the one thing where I have a little bit of doubt about them. Gazadov was incredible last year. I don't know much about Max Anchor. I do know about Sean Melvin, great goalie, but he's never really been the guy or has done it like convincingly. He's been mostly a backup in Ottawa and to Gazdov last year. So I do really like what they did. I think the only big question is goalkeeper. You know, did they go 1A 1B? Like what's the plan there? But I think this is a really good team, and I think they addressed their problems really well for the most part.
And Matt, what's your thoughts?
I'd have to agree. Addressed the goal scoring problems well with Krat and especially Bustos.
Yeah.
Proven in the league. Scored a ton of goals for them in the past. Has played for the last 2 years now. I think it was 2 years in Sweden, which is a high level. That's a tough league to play in.
Oh, yeah.
And coming back now, the fans are going to love him. And as long as him and Krat can build a relationship, they can score goals. Because that was their only problem. They had one of the best defensive records in the league last year. So the fact that they only were just able to sneak into the playoffs at that fifth spot, right? Was it fifth or fourth?
It was fifth, yeah.
It was fifth, right? Yeah. Just to be able to finish fifth, but with one of the best defensive records shows where they struggled. Unfortunately, they did lose some of those defenders that made their defense so good, right? So how they now mix in keeping the defense solid despite losing those guys, but scoring more goals with their new attackers will be interesting to see. If there's a bit of a you'd expect, and there kind of has to be an increase in the production in terms of goals, but you'd also I think there will be a bit of a drop off on defense. So how they balance that out, if their record kind of stays the same because you're losing one thing while gaining another, or if they're able to keep that defense, well, you don't really know yet. They're a bit of a mixed bag with how much they lost, but I expect them to make the playoffs. I think, like you said, they're a very exciting team, 100%, a ton of potential. They can keep that defense strong, and now if they can add goals with guys like Bustos and Krat, they should be able to compete with Cavalry and Forge, which would be really exciting to see. I'm not going to pick them over Cavalry or Forge. I'm not that high on them.
Yeah.
But I think they're probably my third or fourth best team. I think it's quite close. I'm big on Valor, so I think it's actually going to be quite close with them in Valor, and then Cavalry and Forge still as that top two. But it should, make for an interesting kind of top four battle, really. I expect them to be definitely in it.
Yeah, and Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, and especially with what you said, they have Valor already in the first game, so it's like that's already that pivotal matchup.
Interesting to
Yeah,
see,
that'll be a good game.
But the glaring issue was Emil Gazdov, who went to CF Montreal. They did bring in a young goalkeeper in Max Anchor itself, who's only 20. So you never know with Max Anchor if he can live up to those shoes itself of Emil Gazdov. But I still think they have a very young squad and a very exciting squad to watch. Like, they did strengthen their back line. They brought in Pedro Machado. They brought in Lejuns. They brought in Caden Chung. And in their attack, like, they have Ronan Kraft. They have Marco Bustos. They have Emmanuel Montejano, who we just talked about before getting into this. He's a guy that you never know what could happen with him. He doesn't have any caps from Mexico, but he could be that star striker in this league that people could just see for the coming years. And it's exciting for Pacific FC, especially with the money that they got from Gazdov.
Yeah.
They rebounded well from that and built on it well. Do I think that they'll compete against Cavalry and Forge? Maybe not yet, but in the future, absolutely.
Yeah, and you're looking at some of the players that went out, and you're looking at, for example, Adonijah Reed, from that left to York United. You have Stephen Yates that went to York United with an undisclosed fee, and you're looking at some of these. One of the two players that went to York United, it looks that it could they could affect that Pacific FC, but you just have to question. But Pacific FC has bounced back of knowing who to sign, and they know how to manage which player that we got rid of, and who should take that spot that we know that could impact the team. I see Pacific FC doing well, and with this new roster.
Like, it does suck that they lost Gazdov itself, but they brought in another youngster in Max Anchor, who, yes, Sean Melvin is a great goalkeeper, don't get me wrong, but you have a guy like Max Anchor who could develop into something way better than him. And you just have a young squad with Danielle DePauli, with Ronan Kraft, who's only 21 itself, and you have Montejano, 23. You have a very young squad, and they could be competing with Cavalry and Forge this season.
Yeah, Sean Melvin, who's the experienced goalkeeper, and don't get me wrong, like Sean Melvin who was versing York United in the playoffs and in the last game in the season with them, and you have to question of this team, is Sean Melvin the actual first option, or is Max Anchor gonna take that first option goalkeeper? And it's just questions, but we might see how Pacific FC will impact the roster.
They took a gamble on Gazdorf, and it paid off well last season. So, hey, they could take a gamble on Max Anchor. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, imagine if he came in and replaced him right away.
Yeah.
Was as good. I mean, I don't expect that. I mean,
no, absolutely not.
I mean, there's a reason he's going to Montreal. Like I said, it's just I like Pacific. I am worried about that defense now. I mean, they lost 4 big defenders. 3 of them were starters. At least, 2 of them were always starting.
Yep.
Right. And then Gazdorf was goalie of the league. That's a huge guy who's, without him, you'd expect they're now going to let in more goals. So if they basically, for me, make or break is not actually their defense, because I do expect it to drop off. There's no way it stays as good as it was last season. Mm-hmm. But even if they had one of the best defenses, so even if they're just middle in the pack for goals conceded and that kind of thing, but as long as they can score more goals, they should at least be able to make the playoffs again, which is, I think, probably a must for them. I think it would be a failure of a season if they don't.
I think even bringing in Pedro Machado, who's 28, and he has that experience itself, he could help that back line itself. Yeah. So you never know.
And Caden Chung. Caden Chung's a good signing,
As long as he doesn't get injured, Kane Chung will be amazing for them. So, I mean, he's already done it with them before. He's won a championship with them before. So, they're definitely not a perfect team, but they're, I do think, better than last year, and I do think made all the right moves to get back to where they were, in even in 2022, getting in the playoffs and starting the season really well. Typically, they kind of start on a heater, then slowly fade away. So it's really going to be about, in September, in October, can they sustain, being a good team and keep scoring. Bustos is definitely the X factor for me. Yeah. If he does well, the whole team's going to do well, because he really is the center of that entire attacking system.
Yeah, I agree.
But they definitely benefited well from that transfer of Gazdorf to Montreal because of that money that they got. They got to rebuild that team and just strengthen the team as much as they could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As the 8 teams we've covered up, for your what your predictions for this regular season and North Star Cup? Who you think is going to make the playoffs? Thomas.
Honestly, I think all of them could, and it's not even picking the 5. Picking the 5 playoff teams isn't hard, but it's picking the 3 who won't make the playoffs is that's where it gets difficult. I think it's gonna be really close, right to the end. I think Cavalry Forge, not necessarily in order, but I think Cavalry, Forge, York, Pacific, and I think either Ottawa or Valor make it. I don't know. They literally all could. It's so tough. I think Halifax is going to be good too, even though they had a big retool. But apparently they did really well in their friendly yesterday. Truthfully, I have no idea except that top 3. I think is kind of locked in. I think with Cavalry, Forge, and probably, I think, either York or Pacific. I think Ottawa was really good, but I don't know. Something tells me maybe even with Mejia, who promises a more attacking system, which should be good for them, I do think kind of the bump from the off season that York and Pacific are going to get might be a bit stronger. So coming out of the gate, maybe a bit better, and then in the long run, that pays off.
Yeah. Matt, what's your...
My probably hot take is I'm not too confident in York, actually.
Oh yeah?
I don't know. I know they're a young team, good team. I just am a little, I don't know. I think Brian Wright's a big loss. I'm a little worried about them losing him. You think that's not as big a deal?
I don't necessarily think that's as big of a deal, purely because he started the year so well, and then like he's always been kind of inconsistent. I mean, if you look in 2023, he played, I think, 26 games. He scored like 3 goals. So it was just last year that burst in like May, June that kind of got him to that Player of the Year. And Altobelli is someone kind of similar in terms of when he gets in good form, he's really good, but then maybe fades off a bit. So I don't necessarily see it as a huge loss, but and even Babuli as well, because sometimes he struggled with back injuries and stuff and was in and out of the team. So I still think York can contend.
Yeah, I think they can contend too. I wouldn't be shocked if they missed it, because like you said, it's so competitive.
Yeah,
I think the only team that we're all probably pretty confident won't make the playoffs is Vancouver.
Yeah,
yes.
Right, but yeah, I mean, like you said, Calgary, Forge, top 2 for sure. I do think Valor and Pacific will make it. That's maybe a bit hot take for Valor to make, and then I'll go. Let's go Ottawa. So yeah, I have Wanderers, Vancouver, and York United missing out.
Okay,
just a little. Yeah, like,
that's fair.
So
I mean, it could go
it's
either
fair,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, you could like spin a wheel. It could be like,
It's like Wheel of Fortune, right?
Yeah.
So Alex, your thoughts, your prediction?
Yeah, I think it's a toss-up as well. It's like I can't predict after like my top 3. It's just a toss-up itself. I do agree that Vancouver is just out of the mix in this one. They just have a thin squad for me, but I don't know why, but I have just a sneaky feeling about Pacific FC have just like they built well, especially with like Gazdolf leaving. They built well on the off season. They could surprise a couple of teams, but I still see Cavalry at 1 and then Forge 2. But it's such a toss up, honestly.
Yeah. It's a competitive season. It's good. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. If I was the one who would predict it, who would make the playoffs, I just have to think that you're so strangled together that all these teams they really want it badly. But you look at Valor FC, you look at York United. I'm mentioning about Adenaji Reed that is going for York United, and you have Stefan Yates that you question, that we've talked about the Pacific FC, and you also said about how York United probably could actually make the playoffs, and I think there could be a chance for York United, probably in that 5th spot. It's like that risk that there might be a chance to have that risk since they're having a new coach, and it includes Atletico Ottawa. No, don't get me wrong about Atletico Ottawa. It's like that battle, if that could have like basically affect them, because you're getting a new coach and you're looking at those probably options that they could have that effect, and like it might not have that effect, but you question that some of the rosters for Atletico Ottawa is actually good, and you look at York United, it's young, and so it just questions the effects. And right now, I still have Calvary and Forge in those playoffs off in there, but I think Halifax Wanderers can make that playoff spot.
Oh yeah,
they're good.
I think we might see Halifax Wanderers in this playoffs. I think Halifax Wanderers can make this playoff, but I think it's in that moment that you're battling for that last spot. That's what I think.
If Thiago Coimbra, I think, gets like better, if his output like increases by a few goals, and suddenly might be in that Golden Boot conversation, because they're just gonna have like Rhea, Johnston, Biello all feeding him the ball. If he gets in that Golden Boot conversation, then I think playoffs is definitely on the cards for Halifax again.
Yeah, and I might even include again, I still see Pacific FC in there.
Could you see them as underdogs?
I don't see underdog. I don't see underdog value there. You already saw Pacific FC already were the Canadian Premier League North Star Cup champs. I just think that Pacific FC is. I would have to have Halifax Wanderers in the underdog, or maybe Valor FC. But it's always this whole thing of questioning if Valor FC can make the playoffs. That is the question, because you're having that discussion that who is that battle for the 5th spot?
I think, just sorry to jump in here, but I think sometimes what we see in the CPL, and something I think is going to be true this year, is that there's going to be a lot of draws. I think it's so competitive. There's going to be a lot of draws. So losing a game might not actually be as bad as it is in previous seasons. So when I see York and Valor, those are teams that historically it's winning or losing. 3 points is going to go, I think, a lot further in this league this year than in past years, and a loss might not do as much harm. So even just kind of being, on and off, winning or losing, maybe not having that consistency, but still getting 3 points every other week, every third week is going to be huge, I think, for the playoff race. So I think when I look at York and Valor, those are win or lose teams. And even though the losses might stack up, as long as they're winning games here and there,
again, those 3 points,
yeah,
they'll get up there, they'll rise up quickly. That's a good take. Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. That's why, I think Valor could surprise a lot of people. I know people always are kind of picking them to make the playoffs, and then they kind of disappoint a lot of the time. But I don't know, there's something about the season. I feel like they're going to do it, make the playoffs, but it'll definitely be a very tight season.
Like right now, the 5 teams is like whole scramble. It's so much that fans could think of it right now, but you have Calvary and Forge in those 2 spots in the playoffs, and we'll see how 2025 season goes. And that's full time of the Red Leaf Card. You can follow us on X, Spotify, and YouTube. I'm your host, Jacob, subbing out.